University. And as we transition into the online, we'll go live in probably a few seconds. And thank you again. We'll just kick off with a little bit of recap of yesterday's and last 4 days of sessions, which many of you have contributed, and then we'll go through the full agenda. Deal. Okay. All right. Good morning. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us for the concluding day of the National Cyber Talent Week. This was a novel concept probably 6 months back, not anymore. We committed to getting a full press event done and organize an initiative towards focus on cyber talent and making sure that we deconstruct and decompose every challenge and every issue that our leaders in this particular field, in this nascent cyber industry, are dealing with, and bring to the fore the different considerations that we need to have, and make sure that we have solutions lined up for them and put together an ecosystem. So it was a very ambitious affair when we started. In 6 months, we put together a week-long event. As you can imagine, the only way probably logically you could think of was to break it down into the regional aspects of it and then bring it to a national stage. So we got the template this time, and I think we can craft this together even in a more holistic fashion as we bring this to a recurring event. For the Cyber Talent Week, initially we started with the Western Conference, and those who have been with us for the entire week have seen that we have looked through different aspects of cybersecurity talent and talent issues. It started off with the innovation entrepreneurship in the West Coast and the number of cybersecurity solutions that are being put together. Then we walked through and decomposed the different cyber functions. Each of the cyber functions have a very interesting aspect to it, and you typically address that over a period of your career. And if you want to have a cyber career, you have so many different ways to start. When we looked at that decomposition of the cyber career, we also looked at how to get to where you probably want to be. Cybersecurity is still a very new industry for those that are getting into cyber security careers. Having a clear goal, just like you have in finance, you have in law, you have in public service, it's very difficult. I can understand, and we have had those discussions not only with the leaders who are trying to hire and acquire more talent, but also with the candidates who have gone into started a career, but also have kind of confused midway trying to figure out what they want to do next. Our journey through the last 3 days have also exposed us to specific functions within the industry that need more attention. We covered critical infrastructure, energy security. I think that is of course, as many of you know, is very close to my heart. That was my last stop, and we'll continue to be focusing on that. We looked at healthcare and the healthcare industry that includes several aspects, from payer to payee to medical devices. It is a great infusion of various challenges that you can see and apply your talent to solve. We also looked at the other industries, such as who are leading, like banking and financial services. They have definitely a great lead on that. We, along with our federal public-private partnership, we also explored the carriers that are present in the federal space. Some of them already have had a long tenure, like NSA and FBI, US Secret Service. Those carriers are fairly well established. We are definitely looking and very, very optimistic about the promising kind of the roles in CISA and the Office of National Cyber Director, the two new brand new agencies built by decades of work. It's maybe a new agency, but the work that's gone to build those are phenomenal. Then we looked at specific areas who are the stakeholders. I think one of the frustrations that many of the talent and talent career seekers have is that they apply for jobs, they don't get a response. Sometimes their requirements don't match, and we are trying to figure out even the job descriptions, the basic bare minimum, how to put together something that would not exclude talent. We can be inclusive in the talent journey. And that brought us with a great session with some of the HR leadership who are in this space, who are getting active, a lot of demand to increase their cyber talent base, not only cyber talent base, but also the tech talent base. And the infusion of cyber and tech just goes hand in hand. So from that, we went into deconstruct the other piece, which is basically the ecosystem of cybersecurity and who are all involved in there. There's academia, there is public sector and the federal agencies, and there is private sector. But with sitting on a foundation of number of nonprofit and NGOs, such as our Cyber Future Foundation, bringing it all together. And those are vital for the growth of our industry. If you think about the credentials that we have, laid down the foundation with this industry, like the ISC Square CISSP, you have CISA, you have the CISA, which is again, I think the auditors know about this more, but I think the cybersecurity industry will know CISA is Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and there's this other CISA that people are aware of. So all put together, I think we have arrived in today's session and today's day to conclude with a few very critical topics. Of course, we're going to start the day with an introduction and a kickoff with a fireside chat with one of the great leaders you are probably already familiar with. But if you're seeking a change into cybersecurity and a career in cyber, must know and get to know the resources and the hard work they're putting in. So we have Kiersten Todt kicking off us with the fireside chat. We'll delve a little bit deeper into the CISA activities and the resources that are available, both for the practitioners as well as for the candidates for getting into cyber. Then we'll move into a very critical discussion, and I can't overemphasize on this. The amount of opportunity that we have in cyber to create new socioeconomic impact, not only just national security, securing our business and our industry and our country. Cybersecurity promises to have a durable career impact. If somebody's getting into cyber now, they can have a long-lasting career in this journey. And what best can we do for the diversity, equity, and inclusion? And that is a consideration that we must have now. It has to be inbuilt. It cannot be just like we say security by design. I think DEI should be by design, built into cybersecurity programs on our infrastructure. As I've also shared that, in my career, I've built about 200 cybersecurity programs with about 140 CISOs. And most of them were building organizations and hiring from each other, right? So I don't want to use the word poaching, but I will. It was all stealing from each other. But I think we have passed that point now. We'll have Anthony Hannon, Dwan Johnson, Jen Foy, the three great leaders representing a very diverse, but also a very resolute commitment to bring diversity to the front. We have a fireside chat with Rodney Peterson from NICE, and we have those who have been in the industry have followed Rodney's career at NIST and NICE and the contributions that him and his teams have made. It's incredible, and I don't think even recollecting my personal career and those that I've worked with in the industry, when we put together cybersecurity organizations, it was always a little bit different and custom and also, of course, nuanced. But if we have to go at scale, I think we have to lean on frameworks and establish structures that will help us to scale in a way that is consistent and also predictable and can help us grow. So that discussion, I think, will shed a light on how can we make use of the resources that are available at NIST and at NICE. As you can imagine from the several board discussions that we probably as leaders are part of, NICE, NIST CSF is kind of established right now. If you talk about NIST CSF in a boardroom, I think people have started to recognize that. How can we make sure the talent aspect comes, especially in cyber, is also picked up in the same way? And hopefully the next 200 programs you're going to build, 80-90% will lean on that structure. Then we go into a panel that we're talking about with a little bit diverse set of leaders representing and diverse as in background and also in every other aspect, is how to prepare for a successful career in cyber. We have had this topic every day. so that you get a little bit of flavor of how cybersecurity leaders have built their careers and the roads that they have taken. I dare to say that we have kind of pounded the gravel a lot and cleared the ways to a certain extent. Of course, cybersecurity is a very dynamic space. The environment changes every day. So yours will be a little bit different than what our current generation of cyber leaders represent. But coming from where we are going to the next decade and longer, we have many lessons to learn from these leaders that are willing to share this with you. Especially those that are joining us online, the students who we love to see in the room here, right? And someday, hopefully, not too far. These leaders have carved out time from their busy schedule to come and kind of share their experiences with you. Please take full advantage. We discussed the human factor yesterday, and then we leaned on the fact that if you reach out to, especially in the cybersecurity community, you definitely got to reach back out, because we are all as anxious to get you in as you're anxious to get into the cyber careers. And that makes a lot of difference. Please don't forget that human connection. Finally, we're going to conclude today with a national cyber workforce strategy, kind of the considerations and the components. Yesterday, Paul Tortoro, who just recently joined D5.NCD, was with us, and he's going to help us close this along with Chris Painter, who's been a great friend and mentor for many of us for a long time. That would be kind of, we started with the composition of the cybersecurity talent ecosystem. We'll end with consideration for cybersecurity strategy. And I believe that will kind of be a fitting end to the sessions. Just for those who are tracking online, we'll take that academia and industry securing dynamic threat environment, the discussion between Diana, Dr. Burley, and Dr. Durand. Online, we'll have a separate sessions. So we'll conclude today right around 2 p.m. And that's how I think I can say that you have to look out for a long-term commitment to the career in cyber. Hopefully, most of the students and those candidates who are looking for a change into cyber have a lot of resources to take. And what better than our critical infrastructure and security agency? If you think about the resources that are being put out there, they're incredible. In a very short time, they've produced an enormous amount of resources that you can leverage, both for the practitioners as well as for the candidates. So with that, I would welcome to stage Kiersten Todt. And it's a pleasure to have you, Kiersten, here. And I'll probably have to completely go through a long list of your achievements. We'll do that, but thank you for joining us today. Thank you. I wish I could read the entire bio. It's actually worth noting, and considering that we've spent quite a bit of time in kind of articulating, leadership journey. I think yours is phenomenal. So are the leaders that are you're surrounded with, and I just hope that this will be something that we can get out to those those are aspiring to join the cybersecurity field. So just briefly, Kiersten Todt is the Chief of Staff at Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. As the Chief of Staff, she is responsible for planning, allocation resources, and development of long-range objectives in support of the department's goals, milestones. She provides strategic vision, guidance, and direction to ensure CISA's directors is prepared to interdict or respond to threats of the homeland. And prior to that, she had a long career, both in public service as well as in nonprofits in the industry, and bringing all that incredible experience to the service of the nation. So thank you, Kiersten. I would love to hear more from you about your new role, and it's not new anymore. So it's been a long road to action. So let's kick off a little bit and get to know what you're doing, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Val. Thank you so much for the work that you continue to do. You and I have been in touch for many years. And, when you were talking about yourself and you're talking about Rodney Peterson and others, I think we have really benefited from institutional knowledge and those who have stayed committed to these issues. Because as we see now, there is the aperture opening, and everybody has sort of caught up to the thinking about the criticality of cybersecurity and building the workforce and what this looks like and the diversity of the workforce. So, you cited a little bit of my background, and if there's one thing that I can take away to share is that there is no linear path in cybersecurity. There's no linear path for this career. And when individuals are coming into this space, it's so critical to know that this is an interdisciplinary field. And so when we're looking at building out this workforce, and this is one of the key priorities for CISA right now, is we're building out our own workforce, but also modeling a workforce, not just for the nation, but globally. It's looking at the traits that every individual can bring to a position, an opportunity. Because when we think about cyber, it's building solutions and it's problem solving. And what that means is we need expertise from sociology, psychology, history, economics. So we're really building out that workforce. So the role that I have at CISA, I look at sort of in 3 buckets. It's first and foremost internally to build out the workforce for us by creating pipelines and modeling approaches that others can take advantage of. So working with vocational schools, community colleges, nonprofits, underserved communities, what I call sort of going to where the talent is. We can't expect everybody to log on to USA Staffing and find an opportunity and then get a job. We really have to be creative in how we're doing that. Then there's obviously the work that we're doing with the federal agencies and helping them understand what their cyber challenges are. If you know, this was actually a statistic I didn't know, but there are 101 federal agencies, and CISA is responsible for securing that .gov network, and the variability of the capabilities is pretty broad. And then there's the industry work, which is something we can talk through, because that's obviously been something that we've all worked for so long. An old term called public-private partnerships, which didn't always mean action, but now we're in this phase of operational collaboration where government and industry are truly coming together to share information in real time and to create context and narrative for that data to be able to secure not just infrastructure, but to secure the nation.
Absolutely. No, I think each of them could be their own jobs, but I'm sure, needs your help to actually set up. If you can deconstruct a little bit, each of these areas are somewhat a little bit independent now, right? But they also need to lean on each other. And from a talent perspective, also the expertise is only so much, right? And I think we're competing with the dynamic cybersecurity threat environment. Where do you see a starting point, and when what's your goal towards that? Like if you look at the federal government structure and securing those 100+ agencies, how do you go about it?
Well, I think what we recognize is, for better or for worse, the baseline level of cybersecurity is actually pretty basic.
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned my work in the nonprofit sector, that was very much focused on how do we help small businesses become more cyber secure? Because as we know, small businesses are critical components of global supply chains, and they often don't have the resources to buy the latest and greatest technology. And that approach was very much on human behavior. And how do you ensure, so we talk a lot in cybersecurity about how humans can be the greatest vulnerability and the weakest link. But if you're educating and training individuals, human behavior and your employees can be your force multiplier for security. So when you look at the variability of the federal agencies, everything from HHS and Veterans Affairs to the Mammal Coalition or Mammal Commission, which is really small, the baseline here is so important, which is also why at CISA we have started to really push forward this multi-factor authentication campaign. When you talk to tech companies, kind of choose your statistic, but somewhere along the lines of 99% of breaches could be mitigated and avoided if everybody used multi-factor. And so we're just really trying to distill it to the basics about encrypting data, patching, phishing education, multi-factor authentication, to start to create that baseline level. And as we've seen, in breaches in the last 12 months, 14 months, just the basics are not being even carried out by some of the broader, bigger critical infrastructure companies. So we're pretty confident that if we can enact these campaigns, that we'll hit a broad swath of critical infrastructure, but importantly, government agencies.
Absolutely. And I think that we can't overemphasize on the 80% can be achieved by the 20%.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And MFA has come a long way from where it was, and hopefully we can all go passwordless. That would be ideal for everyone, I guess. So coming back from that broad lens of uplifting with a baseline level of hygiene, achieving a higher level of standard, How do you apply that to workforce? Because you can do so much with technology, but again, you need people to get it done, right? Actually implement. What is your thought on getting workforce accelerated?
Well, this really gets to education and training. And I think, when we look at how we create cultures, we talk about how there have been institutional knowledge that gets built out. And one of the things that we've talked about is that the best time to create culture is when you're onboarding. So being able to educate and train employees when they're onboarding and have that be a priority, the training of cybersecurity, can go a long way to really building out that cyber workforce that's creating a culture of security and a culture of prioritizing cyber. And that, as we look at people, at the end of the day, technologies are just a piece, but people are at the core. And the themes of everything that you do certainly highlight that. And so the training and the education and prioritizing cybersecurity in your culture can then create a broader effort and this force multiplication effect of how we build security into workforce.
Absolutely, and it looks like you have your learning officer as well. We had Anthony Skurlock on our event earlier this week, and I think that's a great commitment coming from the agency. Not only showing like what to do, but also giving the content out. So very helpful there. How about you kind of CISA's mission is beyond cyber also, right? How do you balance the two? Is it separate or it's together? Your thoughts on how can industry learn from what you're doing?
I think, as everybody knows at this point, the interdependencies that have been created through the digital economy really mean that everything is linked. So when you talk about CISA being more than just cybersecurity, we have emergency communications, infrastructure protection, stakeholder outreach, regional work. All of these pieces totally feed together. And one of the things as we're looking at this next generation of CISA, it's how do we integrate all of those capabilities? So if you take the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we're obviously focused on cyber as a vector of war. But when you think about it, if there were to be an attack on critical infrastructure, the entity and how that would trickle down, it would trickle down into critical infrastructure, which would impact a physical environment, which would impact a community, a region, a state, local government, a state and local locality. And so if we think about the whole circumference of what CISA does, that touches on everything that we do. So our regional offices are modeled after the FEMA offices, and we have cybersecurity advisors, physical security advisors there, and they're working with the state and local governments and the communities to protect and be more resilient. So when we've seen events of domestic terrorism, we are there at those entities to help and support. And so there's no real, just like infrastructure,
right.
the lines about what is critical and what is not have blurred over the last few years with the interdependencies. The same is true for CISA's mission. It's obviously, it's all integrated.
Right, absolutely. And I think, it's good to see that the agency itself is lined up at the way the industry is going, like IT, OT, all of them together, because industrial control system never had the cybersecurity context to it.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So the other thing that I was curious, and I'm sure a lot are, in terms of executing the big goals that we have at CISA, what kind of priorities are you looking? Is it sector based, or is it particular function based? What is the way CISA is approaching this?
So one of the top priorities is building the workforce. When we're looking at how we secure the nation, it is how do we build the workforce to match and marry up and align with the gaps that we see today, and being much more thoughtful and innovative about how we're doing that. And so again, to the point about the interdisciplinary nature, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility elements of the workforce are ones that we really want to model. Again, not just for government agencies, but more broadly. So we have several initiatives underway to really build those out. And they're being built out not to check a box, but to really honor and value the importance of diversity of thinking. Sure. So when we think about problem solving, innovation demands that we're getting people who are thinking differently. There's a story that I tell because I think it's so powerful. I was working with NSTAC on the cyber moonshot a few years ago, and we had somebody from the United States Agency for International Development come and talk to us about what it is to have a grand challenge. She was making the analogy between grand challenge and moonshot. And she talked about a competition that they had to build the Ebola suit. And ultimately, one of the primary members of their team was a wedding dress designer. because that individual knew about the breathability of fabric, knew how to bend with fabric, all these pieces that we wouldn't necessarily think. So when we think about what it is to have a diverse workforce, it is diversity of thinking. And one of the efforts that I'm particularly proud of and very committed to is our inclusion effort and accessibility effort. So being able to attract and retain and build out an inclusive workforce that really honors neurodiversity and looks at how neurodiversity and neurodistinction can truly build into a workforce. And that type of thinking is absolutely critical for this space, not just today, but in the future. And that's why it's a key priority for the agency.
No, absolutely. And I think you also have the great opportunity. Federal government and the workforce itself is quite diverse, and you could tap into it. Any thoughts around that? How do you get to tap into those that are not in cyber, but bring them into cyber?
So we're looking at building out more rotation and workforce sharing programs. Obviously, there are models for those with industry. There's something called the Partnership for Public Service that MasterCard had a key role in, and I worked very closely because that was one of the recommendations from the commission that we did in 2016, which was to get somebody out of college, have them apply to this process. They then get a job in government, and then they have a job in the private sector waiting for them. They have to apply for it, but it's available, and then they would get loan forgiveness. So there's the industry government partnership, but then there's the rotation within government, and you have models like the Presidential Management Fellowship and others, but we're really looking at opportunities to do that specifically in cyber, not for those that necessarily have cyber jobs, but for those who are doing other work that want to come in and learn more about cyber that they can then take back to their job. Because as we know, cyber is so critical to every mission, regardless of what your expertise is.
Absolutely, and there are so many different ways to get into and contribute to cyber functions. We went through some of those in the last few sessions here in the last days. Do you see that non-cyber people would be able to get a starting point with CISA at some point?
Absolutely, and this goes to this diversity and this interdisciplinary approach. One of the efforts that I've been working on since I started there, and I still feel like it's early, but I think it's been 6 or 7 months, has been working to attract and recruit college students who have liberal arts backgrounds, but have an interest in some piece of this or think cyber is interesting, but they don't know why, to be able to bring them in. And that's one of the key pieces that I really encourage when we're going out to recruit is you don't have to have a math and science background. There are obviously lots of positions that we have for that in engineering, but there is, again, this diversity of thinking. And I think, when you think about cybersecurity, it's about being sort of, quote, the good proverbial athlete, having an aptitude and an interest and a desire and a curiosity. Those elements really lead to success in this space.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that needs to come out more, both in our industry
Absolutely,
communication, yes. and as definitely, I want to know how can the industry help in this space, because I think we've already put together a great industry, consortium. I mean, the engagement of the industry that we see with CISA now is completely different from what we have experienced before. So, anything you want to highlight about the various public-private partnership and also advisory councils are put together?
So CISA has several councils that we actually convene. One is the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee that is specifically intended to serve Director Easterly's mission and her priorities. It's not to serve necessarily the legislated CISA priorities, but it's these other elements around communications and those that we are identifying for the current effort. And then there's the Cyber Safety Review Board that we're working in collaboration with DHS headquarters with policy. And there's obviously the other entities like the NSTAC and others that all have advisory roles. And these are different ways to bring industry expertise into what we're doing. But I think, one of the things that has been really fascinating over the course of the last 6 and 7 months since I've been there is the stakeholder outreach. I mean, one of the things that we have absolutely prioritized, as we all know, the 85% of critical infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector. So as a government agency, we're not going to have all the answers, but what we can do is share information. And no matter what, whenever we share, there's always a desire to share more. But I think we've really been forward-leaning, and Jen has very much been forward-leaning on what we're trying to share. We may not have all the data. We may not know how the data is connected. But if we're sharing this with industry and we all work together, this is that operational collaboration, then we can put the points together and create that constellation that might not be accessible or understandable with imperfect information.
Absolutely, and cybersecurity is imperfect without the information. I think that's the key and core. Do you see this being a two-way, especially with the ISACs and all that in place? How do you see operationally functioning?
So I think all of the organizations that are out there helping to represent industry and sectors and associations and ISACs are critical. I mean, one of the pieces now is that, no one is really in the business of adjudicating value, because we need as much help as we can get in the space from industry, from government, from associations. And so one of the things that we have focused on in the reorganization of CISA a couple of years ago was the development of the Stakeholder Engagement Division. And that very much intersects with the ISACs, the ISOWs, the state and local governments, so that we have a presence and an understanding of what's going on. But again, also so that we're sharing our tools. In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we developed a Shields Up webpage, which was very much about, here are the things you should be doing to make yourself more resilient and secure. And we adapted those for small businesses, for state and local governments. We did a governor's guide earlier this year, really thinking about how do we take the tools and the information that we have and make it as adaptable as possible to all of these different stakeholder groups, because everybody has a role in securing the nation.
Absolutely, and I think it's a collective enterprise for the industry as well as those that we support in the business. How do you see CISA's outreach and role with respect to business, like business leaders? I think CISA is very well aligned, and there's a good amount of interaction with the cybersecurity industry. But how about business? Do you also have the business interactions that?
We do, and there are different ways that we're doing this. I mentioned the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee, but probably much more importantly is the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, which is actually a legislated entity, and it's the only legislated entity that includes all of the cyber capabilities of government. So NSA, DoD, FBI, in addition to DNI, with CISA, to work with industry. And this is that operational collaboration piece. And what we've done is invited these companies into this collaborative to share information. So we're sharing what we're seeing. Companies are now sharing what they're seeing. And one of the things that evolved through this collaboration, which was launched in August, was immediate and real-time response with Log4 Shell, which happened in December. The event happened was discovered on a Friday. We convened a call with all of our JCDC partners on that Saturday. And then we created a Slack channel, which continues to exist, to be able to share information in this private and close discussion so that industry can share what they have. And we're continuing to look at building that out. We just launched an ICS, an Industrial Control System consortium for the JCDC. This is all about how do we build out that engagement with business and industry. And this is just one tool that we're using, and it obviously the evolution of it is critical. But I think what it represents is when we come together to share information that we have, then we're so much better together. Chris Inglis, who's the director of the National Cyber Director in the White House, often talks about cyber as a team sport, but also how in order to beat one of us, you have to beat all of us. And that whole integrated capability, I think, is what's so important.
Absolutely. And then we heard from the new director of cybersecurity, I think, workforce and strategy. He has Paul Turturro has a long title, but I think that team is growing too. It's great to see the way it's complementing the work that CISA is doing. We talked about a lot of programs here, and I think there is each of those have their own ways of execution and operation. How do you see someone who's trying to get into the cyber career, trying to kind of line up and identify and support these, because I think from the industry side, it's probably a little bit more flexible to get engaged. From the government side, hopefully, with the workforce expansion that you have, we all get there. How do you guide the new joinees in the cybersecurity field to probably, get engaged in each of these? Just follow what CISA is putting it out there, or actually do something?
How to get involved in the CISA workforce?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we're really looking to do is to be able to publicize more of the positions that we're doing. We're starting to do that on LinkedIn, in addition to the USA Staffing. But then there are these other systems and networks that we're sharing and working on the recruiting. So being able to connect with industry and, importantly, with colleges, universities, as I mentioned earlier, community colleges, vocational schools. We also have this, on November 15th of last year, DHS launched the Cyber Talent Management System, which is really intended to bypass some of the bureaucracy and try to attract talent at a rate and at a level that is reasonably comparable to industry, certainly more than just sort of the basic government rates, and looking at different ways to attract that talent. So while government itself isn't known for being flexible and agile, we're trying to be able to integrate these recruitment and personnel policies to at least try to have it keep up or be comparable in some way.
Yeah, no, we also talked about yesterday with some of our friends from DHS is that CISA being a new industry, a new organization, has some of the newer elements that government should have, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully we can leverage all that. And I'm really excited about Dr. Easterly talked about the women in cyber and the girls in cyber goal. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think that's a great, it shouldn't be called ambitious, actually should be a practical goal.
Yeah, and that really goes to the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts. So we're working with Girls Who Code, Empower, these other organizations to really go to the talent, go to these underserved communities to help all individuals understand that if they're interested in this, there are opportunities there. And certainly with girls and working in different groups and affinity groups to help everybody understand that if you have the interest, you have the curiosity for this space, there is absolutely a role for you. And helping bridge that gap of a lack of understanding between where the positions are and how people understand them. And to your earlier point, that's really where we have to do a better job. And one of the very simple ways to do that is also in how we define position descriptions.
Yeah.
How do we look at these roles? We don't have to always talk about the technical. I say that when I ran President Obama's commission in 2016 as the executive director, my technical role within government was an IT specialist, because that was the only cyber position description. And I am not an IT specialist. As a friend of mine says, I can answer the multiple choice questions. I can't answer the essay.
But I mean, well done from there. I think that's where we need the holistic approach to cyber. It's not just the technologists who are going to make this happen. I think sometimes we mess up more than we actually do, right?
But as we tell our kids, you learn as much from failure as you do from success. Arguably, you learn more. And so we just have to have the resilience to move through those experiences and those challenges to understand what we've learned from them to get to the other side.
Absolutely. And I think, over the last 5 days itself, we have just uncovered so much of other alternative ways to get into cyber and learn. Policy is a great place. In industry, we typically apply to GRC, where we have a more open, I think, job description than you have for a SOC analyst. And I think those are the ones that we need to work on and improve on. Well, as we get to the kind of the last few minutes of this session, I wanted to highlight some of the future tools and resources we have. And we are behind one of the tools, which is apprenticeship, and we actually have some of our friends joining us and we've been working. How do you see the different stages of career introduction and career journey? Like, typically internship is very well understood. Apprenticeship, hopefully you can get there, and then full time. Do you have any specific guidance on how the industry could get behind the activities that the government is doing in this space?
Well, I won't even highlight what the government's doing. We just interestingly had a discussion yesterday talking about apprenticeships, because I do think it's something that we don't do really well in this space. And I think that there are opportunities. It can be modeled from government, modeled from industry, but to really look at that and to support the growth in the education and to shadow and to see the opportunities. I also think, there's a mindset shift that we've seen in industry over the years, but interestingly, government was lagging, which is you're not intended to land in a job and be there for 20 years. And the whole ability to be agile between industry and government benefits everybody. And so in this space, being able to support that back and forth and looking at how do you learn. And so to your point about career escalation, it can be, you're in government and you learn something, you then apply it in industry, and then you come back into government to do something else. I think being able to support that, it's, a good boss is always going to want to see the people who work for them move up and maybe even move out. It's not a demonstration of failure if you've been able to promote somebody to evolve and grow and to find opportunities. And, when people are coming to CISA looking for roles and they're like, I'll look anywhere. And so we'll talk about other cyber jobs. In my opinion, if somebody is interested and has capabilities, them coming into government is a success for all of us. Obviously, I want them to be at CISA, but if they end up at ONCD or they end up at another agency where they're working. So I think this ability to support that flexibility, but I really would, think the apprenticeship piece is one that we have a lot of opportunity for growth and evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would second that and support everything that you do. And I think, our industry needs more tools and resources to make sure that we have access to the talent when we can, especially when cyber commercially is very expensive, right, to do. So the other probably a few things that I had in mind was, how do we make sure that the CISA's work federally is actually also regionally, I would say, reflected, right? A lot of the cyber work gets done outside cyber, SOCs. Most of the work gets done with the collaboration between industry and private sector. What is your guidance for organizations like us that can do more with what CISA's mission is?
I think what we're really looking at doing is building out our regional work in the communities, and we're even looking at a potential like a cyber 311, and as you've talked about, in how do we build out these capabilities at the regional and community level? And so I would encourage organizations that are really doing the work to connect with us at the regional level, to be able to say, this is what we're interested in, and use the resources that we have because they're obviously connected to what we're doing. But this goes to this integration question that you asked earlier, which is a lot of what we can do to create success and impact starts at the community level. And that's working with the nonprofits. And again, as you shared and I mentioned earlier, the work that I've done with nonprofits, I'm a big believer that so much of opportunity and impact starts there because they're the ones that see the problems and then can see very directly where the impact can happen, and also the challenges to success, which can be addressed quickly.
Absolutely. Well, great. This has been a great conversation. I'll probably open up a few questions for the chief here.
My kids laugh every time they say that.
We're getting used to it. So
you can't call it. You can't call it that.
Tom, sir.
Yeah, Kiersten, with so much information, so many entities coming together, sharing so much information, how does CISA separate the signal from the noise?
It's a great question, and I think what's fascinating is that companies that are sharing information are not sharing noise. What they might be sharing are things that may not be registering as significant, but they don't know that, just as we wouldn't know that. And that's why you get this broader impact when you can mark it up against other data. So, for example, if we're getting something through the JCDC and everyone else is like, well, we haven't seen that, that must be not significant, or okay, that's funny because we've seen this and you've seen that and all of that. So I wouldn't say it's signals to noise. I don't feel like we get sort of throwaway, but it is just this understanding of, is this significant? And one of the things that we talked about in the Shields Up webpage and what we're discussing is lowering the threshold for reporting. So we're seeing, to simplify it, probably a little bit more noise, but we'd rather see that to be able to see what is actually an anomaly. Because whenever, since February, since the invasion, whenever you see something that's happening, we're all going to, okay, is this just the tip of the iceberg? And so particularly right now, we're really encouraging everybody just to share that and be able to decipher and distinguish. But that's also where the partners from industry are incredibly helpful because they can help determine that as well. Say, yeah, we saw that, 6 months ago, this is nothing. Or, yeah, this is definitely, making us pause for a moment.
Yeah, interesting, especially when we talked about see something, say something yesterday about the DHS campaign, right? And probably we need something similar where we can distill to done. Arma.
So in that vein, we're actually very excited about the new cyber incident reporting law, which is sort of funny to say, like we're excited for the mandatory reporting. But we know CISA has up to 2 years to put out that NPRM. And obviously with all that's going on, it's probably better for the universe if that comes out sooner. So is there a process you can talk about that you're going to look at and then work with industry before the NPRM comes out?
So this is another one where I can answer the multiple choice question, but I can't answer the essay. There is a very specific legislative process. Unfortunately, we have people at CISA that are doing this with the rulemaking and all of that, but certainly and we are absolutely prioritizing this process to be able to move it along. I can certainly follow up with you on the details of that because I think it's been an interesting education. Just, you pass a law and everyone's like, okay, this must be mandatory now. It's like, well, no, you've got the rulemaking, you've got all of these, but it's a priority. And the wonderful piece, and to the work that you're doing, is we're hearing from industry it's a priority. So we're not seeing any sort of dissent about this. Everyone's like, when are you going to get it done? So fortunately, then that means we've got resources, we've got backing, we've got momentum. But I'll follow up with you on the specifics.
All right. This has been a great conversation. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank
for
you, Val.
your
Thank you for
support.
all your work. Thank you for your
course.
commitment to this issue.
Absolutely. So much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kiersten.